On 13th October 1917, one of 20th century's most amazing miracles took place in a small town in Portugal. It was a miracle like those read about in the Bible during the time of Moses. And this miracle was seen by a crowd estimated to be between 30,000 and 100,000 people, and was reported in the secular media of the time. The crowd ranged from faithful believers to socialists who were angered by the idea of there being a God. There are many accounts of what happened. This series will present a reading of the autobiography of Lucia, one of the 3 children who saw the visions of the Virgin Mary. She not only described what she saw in the apparitions, but also what happened to the children leading up to and after the miracle. The stories of the Miracle of Fatima are familiar to many Catholics, often by watching the portrayal of the events in movies. While many of the on-screen portrayals may be close depictions of what took place, the reality is often what actually transpired are summarized or even edited out. For example, many people believe that the first apparition the 3 children saw was of the Blessed Virgin Mary. In this episode, we see that there were several phenomena that preceded the apparitions of the Virgin Mary by over 2 years. When I was 7 years old, my mother decided that I should take over the care of our sheep. My father did not agree, nor did my sisters. They were so fond of me that they wanted an exception made in my case. My mother would not give in. "She's just like the rest," she said. "Carolina is already 12 years old. That means she can now begin to work in the fields, or else learn to be a weaver or a seamstress, whichever she prefers." The care of our flock was then given to me. News that I was beginning my life as a shepherdess spread rapidly among the other shepherds. Almost all of them came and offered to be my companions. I said yes to everybody and arranged with each one to meet on the slopes of the Serra. Next day, the Serra was a solid mass of sheep with their shepherds, as though a cloud had descended upon it. But I felt ill at ease in the midst of such a hubbub. I therefore chose 3 companions from among the shepherds, and without saying a word to anyone, we arranged to pasture our sheep on the opposite slopes. These were the 3 I chose: Teresa Matias, her sister Maria Rosa, and Maria Justino. On the following day, we set out in the direction of a hill known as the Cabeço. On the eastern slope is a cave. Together with our flocks, we climbed almost to the top of the hill. At our feet lay a wide expanse of trees that stretched away down towards the level valley below. Around midday, we ate our lunch. After this, I invited my companions to pray the rosary with me, to which they eagerly agreed. We had hardly begun when, there before our eyes, we saw a figure poised in the air above the trees. It looked like a statue made of snow, rendered almost transparent by the rays of the sun. "What is that?" asked my companions, quite frightened. "I don't know." We went on praying with our eyes fixed on the figure before us, and as we finished our prayer, the figure disappeared. As was usual with me, I resolved to say nothing, but my companions told their families what had happened the very moment they reached home. The news soon spread, and one day, when I arrived home, my mother questioned me. "Look here. They say you've seen, I don't know what, up there. What was it you saw?" "I don't know." And as I could not explain it myself, I went on. "It looked like a person wrapped up in a sheet." As I meant to say that I couldn't discern its features, I added, "You couldn't make out any eyes or hands on it." My mother put an end to the whole matter with a gesture of disgust. Childish nonsense. After some time, we returned with our flocks to the same place, and the very same thing happened again. My companions once more told the whole story. After a brief interval, the same thing was repeated. It was the third time that my mother heard all these things being talked about outside, without my having said a single word about them at home. She called me, therefore, quite displeased, and demanded, "Now, let us see. What is it that you girls say you saw over there?" "I don't know, Mother. I don't know what it is." Some people started making fun of us. My sisters, recalling that for some time after my first communion I had been quite abstracted, used to ask me rather scornfully, "Do you see someone wrapped in a sheet?" I felt these contemptuous words and gestures very keenly, as up to now I had been used to nothing but caresses. But this was nothing really. You see, I did not know what the good Lord had in store for me in the future. Around this time, Francesco and Jacinta sought and obtained permission from their parents to start taking care of their own flock. So, I left my good companions and I joined my cousins, Francesco and Jacinta, instead. To avoid going to the Serra with all the other shepherds, we arranged to pasture our flocks on the properties belonging to my uncle and aunt and my parents. One fine day, we set out with our sheep for some land that my parents owned, which lay at the foot of the eastern slope of the hill that I have already mentioned. This property was called Casa Velha. Soon after our arrival, about mid-morning, a fine drizzle began to fall, so fine that it seemed like mist. We went up the hillside, followed by our flocks, looking for an overhanging boulder where we could take shelter. Thus, it was for the first time that we entered this blessed hollow among the rocks. It stood in the middle of an olive grove belonging to my godfather, Anastasio. From there you could see the little village where I was born, my parents' home, and the hamlets of Casavelha and Aera de Pedra. The olive grove, owned by several people, extended to within the confines of the hamlets themselves. We spent the day there among the rocks, in spite of the fact that the rain was over and the sun was shining bright and clear. We ate our lunch and said our rosary. I'm not sure whether we said it that day, saying just the word Hail Mary and Our Father on each bead. So great was our eagerness to get to our play. Our prayer finished, we started to play pebbles. We had enjoyed the game for a few moments only when a strong wind began to shake the trees. We looked up startled to see what was happening, for the day was unusually calm. Then we saw coming towards us, above the olive trees, the figure I have already spoken about. Jacinta and Francesco had never seen it before, nor had I ever mentioned it to them. As it drew closer, we were able to distinguish its features. It was a young man, about 14 or 15 years old, whiter than snow, transparent as crystal when the sun shines through it, and of great beauty. On reaching us, he said, "Do not be afraid. I am the angel of peace. Pray with me." Kneeling on the ground, he bowed down until his forehead touched the ground and made us repeat these words 3 times. "My God, I believe, I adore, I hope, and I love you. I ask pardon of you for those who do not believe, do not adore, do not hope, and do not love you." Then rising, he said, "Pray thus. The hearts of Jesus and Mary are attentive to the voice of your supplications." His words engraved themselves so deeply on our minds that we could never forget them. From then on, we used to spend long periods of time prostrate like the angel, repeating his words until sometimes we fell, exhausted. I warned my companions right away that this must be kept secret, and thank God they did what I wanted. Some time passed, and summer came, when we had to go home for siesta. One day we were playing on the stone slabs of the well down at the bottom of the garden belonging to my parents, which we call the Arnero. Suddenly, we saw beside us the same figure, or rather angel, as it seemed to me. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Pray, pray very much. The most holy hearts of Jesus and Mary have designs of mercy on you. Offer prayers and sacrifices constantly to the Most High." "How are we to make sacrifices?" I asked. "Make of everything you can a sacrifice, and offer it to God as an act of reparation for the sins by which He is offended, and in supplication for the conversion of sinners. You will thus draw down peace upon your country. I am its angel guardian, the angel of Portugal. Above all, accept and bear with submission the suffering which the Lord will send you." A considerable time had elapsed when one day we went to pasture our sheep on a property belonging to my parents, which lay on the slope of the hill I have mentioned, a little higher up than Valinhos. It is an olive grove called Portrayal. After our lunch, we decided to go and pray in the hollow among the rocks on the opposite side of the hill. To get there, we went around the slope and had to climb over some rocks above the Portrayal. The sheep could only scramble over these rocks with great difficulty. As soon as we arrived there, we knelt down, with our foreheads touching the ground, and began to repeat the prayer of the angel. "My God, I believe, I adore, I hope, and I love you." I don't know how many times we had repeated this prayer when an extraordinary light shone upon us. We sprang up to see what was happening and beheld the angel. He was holding a chalice in his left hand, and the host suspended above it, from which some drops of blood fell into the chalice. Leaving the chalice suspended in the air, the angel knelt down beside us and made us repeat 3 times, "Most Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, I adore you profoundly, and I offer you the most precious body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus, present in all the tabernacles of the world, in reparation for the outrageous, sacrilegious, and indifference with which he himself is offended. And through the infinite merits of his most sacred heart and the Immaculate Heart of Mary, I beg you the conversion of poor sinners. Then, rising, he took the chalice and the host in his hands. He gave the sacred host to me and shared the blood from the chalice between Jacinta and Francesco, saying as he did so, "Take and drink the body and blood of Jesus Christ, horribly outraged by ungrateful men. Make reparation for their crimes and console your God." Once again he prostrated on the ground and repeated with us 3 times more the same prayer, Most Holy Trinity, and then disappeared. We remained a long time in this position, repeating the same words over and over again. When at last we stood up, we noticed that it was already dark, and therefore time to return home.